Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the Football Friday podcast. Matt Catrillo, Alex Kozora, Ian Hunter here with you this week. I promise Tyler DiGiacomo is still a part of this show. He just had a rough time with his schedule. He's a very busy man, that Tyler DiGiacomo, so hopefully we'll get him on at some point. He is. He's got legitimate stuff going on during the summer. Ian, Alex, what's going on?
What was that?
What's going on?
Nothing. I just ordered your wedding present. It is a Philadelphia Flyers jersey.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter.
Time they won the cup, so you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'll throw up after I see that.
I usually wouldn't ruin such a great surprise, but I was excited. So,
Alex, what's going on?
I'm good. It's a crazy start to this one.
Yeah, of course. And always. When isn't it, actually?
Ian is very hostile today. You okay, Ian? Yeah, I know I'm sad about Fleury, too. I think this is just Fleury-related.
It really is. I'm just upset.
Mm-hmm.
I may or may not have teared up while watching the tribute video this morning, so I don't care. I'm man enough to admit it.
Yeah.
You're also married, so it's over at this point. You're not. You're not trying to impress anybody.
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm really not.
But you know what? Truthfully, you guys have nothing to complain because you got back-to-back Stanley Cups. I'm just throwing that out there. I get it.
Yeah,
he was a fan favorite, but come on. You got back-to-back Stanley Cups.
We can still be sad, Catrillo.
You can still be sad, but I'm just saying, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't forget you got it good, is what I'm saying.
I can go win a great award tomorrow, but if a mule kicks me in the stomach tomorrow, it's still going to hurt.
Except there's like hardly any mules in this area.
Well, I'm in a different area than you, Catrillo.
Are there mules in Illinois?
I can find anything in Illinois. Kevin Zambori's in Illinois. I can find anything in Illinois.
You know what? That is a fair statement. I mean, I know there's donkeys in Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, because one of my fiance's cousins has a donkey on their farm. But
I thought you were going to say one of my fiancés. I was going to ask a very important question.
No, definitely not what you think. No.
Congrats on the Mormonism.
Yeah. That is not my style.
Is it bad? The first thing I thought was like, man, how the hell are you going to pay for 2 weddings?
Well,
I was wondering how 2 girls fell in love with him. I was like, I don't know. That's pushing it. 1 surprised me. 2, no way.
Yeah, 1 surprised you said there was no God when that first happened. When I first started going out with my fiance. I still remember that to this day.
Still pretty sure about that. Doesn't make sense. Got some questions. All right, well.
Anyway, yeah.
Off the rails.
Yeah, here we go. So, well. All right, anyway, trying to get this back together here. So let's get back to the NFL and getting back to what we were discussing last week on the show with Alex and I here. Ian, we missed you last week, so wanted to get your take. We'll start off the show with Le'Veon Bell's contract situation with the Steelers, and then your take on the AFC East, NFC North, and we'll kind of work in the news of David Harris now signing a 2-year deal with the Pats, who, again, just to continue feeding off their AFC East foes and the players that they don't retain. Derek Carr, just breaking news earlier, just signed his 5-year, $125 million deal. We'll react to that and a couple of things falling from that. And then a couple of things, this is clearly an off-season topic, but I think it's somewhat of an interesting discussion anyway. And that is there were 2 Cowboys rookies, that being Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, who were named with some high NFL honors, so we'll talk about that as well. And we finally have our first question that was sent to us as part of like a new mailbag thing that we're doing as part of the show. We'll talk about that. We'll save that for the end of the show. So here we go. Starting with Le'Veon Bell. Alex, you and I talked about last week about the contract situation with Bell. He was not in Pittsburgh for mandatory minicamp because he's still not under contract. They're trying to work out a long-term deal, which the Steelers have until July 15th to work out. If not, Bell signs a franchise tender, which gets him $12 million for next season. So we know he's going to be there. It's just a question of what's the concern level as far as Bell's long-term future, as far as trying to get him on the field as quickly as possible, because you want all your guys in camp and continuing to start that preparation for the upcoming season. So we got your take on that last week, Alex. Ian, what are your thoughts on those 2 parts of Bell's future here with the Steelers, both immediate and future?
Well, in terms of him not being there for minicamp, I'm not overtly concerned. I mean, this is part of the process, it's part of the offseason, and yeah, you want him to be there, but it's not a huge deal. As long as he's there for, a little bit of training camp and, is ready for week 1 of the regular season, I don't really care. I think the contract's going to get done. And but when it talk about concerns, I want Le'Veon Bell to stay in Pittsburgh for a long time. But I also have to remember that he's had a couple of suspensions and he's had a couple of injuries. And those are two big things that always kind of muddle up contracts. And, deals that you think would be nice and easy, it's not going to be easy for those factors because Pittsburgh is going to have to try to find a way to protect themselves a little bit. Am I concerned? No. You have to think about it? Yes. And I think Pittsburgh will get through all those concerns, and I think Le'Veon will be ready to go week 1 in Pittsburgh without a problem.
Overall, as I kind of mentioned last week, I tend to agree. I think that the Steelers will be able to get something worked out long term. I don't know if it'll be by the 15th, but I think eventually it will get done.
Did it move to the 17th?
It did.
Oh, it did. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, the 17th. Yes, you're correct about that. Well, even though, add those 2 extra days, even if they don't, it's still going to be tough for them to get it done by then, but it still can be done. I'm sure they're talking around the clock trying to get it worked out. But I think eventually a deal will get done. As you've been seeing, the Steelers are starting to take care of their own. You saw the contract with Antonio Brown last year. And as far as the camp thing is concerned, of course, I want everybody in at camp, but he will play this season. But I think it was important for him to be there because the Steelers' backfield behind Bell is going to be so different this year without D'Angelo Williams, with the addition of James Conner now, who's going to have a big role, and after he was drafted in the 3rd round by Pittsburgh. So I think it might have been important for him to be in camp for those types of reasons. But as far as his on-field production is concerned, I don't think that really affects it, though. He is coming off that injury he suffered late in the season that kept him out of most of the AFC Championship game. Alex, I don't know, you've had a week more to think about this. Any other thoughts other than what you said last week?
No, I really don't have any additional thoughts. I think we're all generally in agreement here. It's very weird to hear speculation just from fans, really. It's not from anyone, that has a ton of clout, but, that Bell could hold out in training camp. There's no benefit to that. You can't work out a long-term deal after July 17th. So if a deal isn't done by then, he's going to sign his tender. He'll play on the tag for the year. There's no leverage. If he holds out, the team literally cannot give him a new deal.
Right, and the fact that, let's face it, Bell hasn't been the cleanest person in the world, as we've seen his drug history in the past, and we've seen the Steelers won't tolerate that. So when you add that into the equation as well, there really is truly no leverage for Bell to even try something like that. It would be idiotic, really, on his point.
Honestly, I think the Steelers have given up that part of the leverage because they've talked about how Bell has matured off the field and how they like him as a person. So I don't think you can come back in a negotiation setting and start using that stuff against him when you've publicly said that you're comfortable with, Bell as a person. But, Bell has, I guess, some leverage because, it is a hefty price tag for this year and you want to get him, inked to a long-term deal, but there's not a ton of it. And once the July 17th deadline passes, there's no leverage. There's no moves left for either side to make. You sign the tender, you play out the year.
Right, that's exactly it. I think that's really all, as you said, that there is to it at this point of the offseason, and we'll continue to monitor that as we get closer to that deadline.
I'm more concerned about Alejandro Villanueva. That's the deal I want to see happen next, and I think that'll happen, and then Le'Veon Bell or whichever order. But I think those are the two deals that are going to happen soon. Yeah,
that's a good point, Ian, because I think that was a guy on the Steelers' offensive line that really took some big strides last year.
Literally, he's 6'9". Yes, he took long strides.
That is true.
And he is, I think, if you wait a whole lot longer with him, he is going to price himself to a point where you're going to have to make tough decisions. If you get him under contract now, even if you give him a really nice raise, somewhat similar to what the Steelers did with Antonio Brown with his first contract, if you give him a nice raise and he grows in and passes that contract, then great. If he doesn't, then you lose a little bit, but not, let's say, like top-end left tackle money.
Right, that's exactly it. And I'll tell you what, though, what a story he's been, just seeing the way his career has ended up this way. He's obviously it started with the Eagles. They brought him in as an undrafted rookie free agent when Chip Kelly was still here. They tried him out at defensive tackle. That really didn't work out after he played tight end when he was with Army. And then the Pittsburgh brings him in and eventually works his way up to being one of the best guys on that line right now. Alex, I know you're a big fan of Villanueva and the way, and obviously being his his off the field story and how he got here to this point, I'm sure that would make you pretty happy too, to make sure that the Steelers lock him up.
Yeah, I mean, the off the field is obviously the thing I think most fans associate Alejandro Villanueva with, but I care about that less and less as we go through his career, and he turns into a legitimate NFL talent and a really good left tackle. The strides he's made in that regard is kind of where I put my focus now, because the off the field has been talked about so much. There isn't a whole lot more that needs to be said. On the field, again, to be a guy that, give credit to Mike Munchak and Sean Sarrett, the offensive line coaches in Pittsburgh, for molding, basically just a lump of clay, but Villanueva's own personal strides, and to handle, going from military life to civilian life and now playing in the NFL. That's a transition that very few have to deal with. But I just think his football IQ has really shown. And just looking back at where he was at 2015 for the second half of the year, filling in for Kelvin Beachum, to where he is now is night and day. And so I give a lot of credit to him for his work ethic, the strides he's taken. Munchak and Sarrett, and also Ramon Foster, the Steelers left guard, for kind of being that steady presence for Villanueva to help him through this time.
Right, and getting back to Villanueva, I mean, this goes without saying, but I'm still going to say it anyway. You really just see the amount of athleticism that he brings to this team and to that offensive line, based on obviously his past playing tight end. They tried a defensive tackle, but you can just see truly the amount of athleticism that he really brings to the game.
Yeah, he's definitely got a lot of that. I think he's got heavy hands. He's a guy that's obviously 6'9", I forget what he is, 330, and I think he has one of the better two-hand chops. We'll see him just knock the hands down from defensive linemen, and he'll take him to the ground because that chop is so violent. And it's some big guys, too, I think. Dunlap or Michael Johnson of the Bengals, he's done that, too, and some smaller guys as well. He did that to Michael Bennett, I think, last year. So he wins in a variety of different ways. He can handle bull rushes. He can handle speed rushes. He can jump set you. He can be a little bit more passive with his regular kick slide. He wins in a lot of ways. And although he's not perfect, and his run blocking is not the best because he is so tall, he's been valuable and the missing piece along the Steelers' offensive line that is, for my money, this is the best Steelers' offensive line in franchise history. And I'm sincere when I say that, and I think they're going to continue to show that in 2017.
Wow, there you go. I like the confidence there in the Alex, and certainly has been the case when you talk about the protection that they've given for Big Ben. Obviously, the running game has obviously been very critical to, and a vocal point of Pittsburgh's offense now with Le'Veon Bell. So I don't think there's anybody that would deny that or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's probably an accurate statement there for Pittsburgh's sake at this point. So, Ian, next thing we wanted to get from you is we wrapped up our divisional talk last week and breaking down what we might see from each division around the NFL. Wrapped up with the AFC East and the NFC North, and we'll start with the NFC North first and get to the AFC East in a sec. Your thoughts on this? Alex and I, basically, we had the Packers winning the division, and then I think you had the Detroit second, Alex, right? Then the Vikings third.
Yeah, I believe so.
Correctly, yeah. I think that's exactly what I had too. Obviously, when you look at the Packers, we obviously know what they bring offensively to the table. Defensively, there's still some concerns there, especially in the secondary. Minnesota, we know all the injuries they had last year. The quarterback situation is still unsolved somewhat at this point, not knowing Teddy Bridgewater's future. And then you look at Detroit, some pieces to like there. Looked like they had a pretty nice draft. And then Chicago, obviously, we know is almost pretty much at rock bottom at this point. So what are your thoughts on this division?
Well, I am going to go to the AFC East first because it's really quick. The Patriots are really good. The rest of the division sucks. Moving on. The NFC North is, I think, can be really competitive. The Packers did not play great for a lot of spurts last year, so I don't know if we can automatically just make them the favorite. As good as Aaron Rodgers is, they had their struggles last year, and I'm interested to see how they kind of overcome those. And I know they had a lot of injuries, but losing Eddie Lacy, and they lost a couple other pieces too. What are they going to be like going into this year? I think Minnesota could be really, really good. I know that, the quarterback's name escaped me.
Sam Bradford.
Bradford, sorry.
So, Ian, they're going to be really good. You can't remember who the starting
But you know what, though? To me,
in the morning, Zora bite me.
You know what? To me, that's symbolic of Sam Bradford. He's forgettable.
I know. I knew who he was. He played really well last year. The biggest issues last year with Minnesota was their porous offensive line and all the injuries that they suffered on their defense. They're getting most of those guys back healthy. We still don't know about Sharif Floyd, though, right? He's still up in the air for playing.
I wouldn't assume on him doing much for the Vikings this year.
Yeah.
His career is in doubt. But that offensive line didn't get a whole lot better. What do they do to fix that?
Yeah. So I think we saw them win a lot of games last year early in the season based on how good their defense was. And I think that they can do that again. And I think this division is going to be competitive. I still think Green Bay wins this division, but it's not going to be a landslide by any stretch. And Detroit's one of those teams where every year I think they're going to be a really good team, and every year they're just kind of, they're okay. They never seem to make any big strides and push into a positive direction. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see Minnesota overtake Detroit this year.
The only thing I'll say to that is I don't know where Minnesota is going to be offensively. I think they're going to have trouble scoring points this year. And I think, Alex, you talked about this last week, too. Just, obviously, the inconsistency with Sam Bradford. The offensive line.
Sam Bradford had his best season last year.
Yeah, but I
think he's going to build on that.
I still don't believe in him, though, overall, as a quarterback.
I mean, they need Laquan Treadwell to play, period. Well, they need him to actually show up.
And that's part of the issue, too, is there's just not a whole lot around Bradford. And I even argue that they've taken more of a step back than what they had last year, because now you also don't have Cordell Patterson, who also gave you a lot on special teams, too.
Yeah, but I feel like you can find another Cordell Patterson. I mean, they drafted some guys, and they need some guys to step up. The biggest Achilles heel is going to be that offensive line. And I'm the first person to admit, if you don't have an offensive line, you're not going to get very far. But I also know that their defense is good enough to mask a lot of the problems that they have.
And that's one thing I will agree with you, Ian, is if Minnesota is going to be any sort of a playoff contender this year, it's going to come through their defense once again, assuming that, again, everybody stays healthy. They had a lot of injuries in that part last year. But getting back to offensively, I think their running game might suffer a little bit, too. A, because of an iffy offensive line, but two, obviously you lose Adrian Peterson, though he was aging, but there really wasn't a whole lot of depth there.
Well, but you bring in Dalvin Cook this year, and Adrian Peterson didn't play last year, and yeah, it was bad, but they didn't really have anyone like a weapon like Dalvin Cook to play not only as a running back, but also receiving the ball as well. That's going to be a different dynamic that we have to remember. He's a different kind of weapon, and he should help not only the offensive line by getting out into space in the receiving game, but he's also going to help keep them balanced and keep them on time.
Yeah, it's a fair point, especially with how versatile he is.
We're talking about a team that I think is going to finish in second or third place. So it's not like I'm saying the Minnesota Vikings are going to win the Super Bowl.
Right, no, I get it.
Green Bay wins this division, but I do think that Minnesota is going to show we thought last year going into the season that they had a legitimate shot at winning the division, and they lost Adrian Peterson and Teddy Bridgewater. But they are still glimpses of a pretty good team there. And they have some good coaching. I think they're going to be a better team than people think. And didn't they sign Calvin Beachum? Did that happen?
No, the Jets signed Calvin Beachum.
Who am I thinking signed?
They signed Riley Reef.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Alex, anything to add about Minnesota, Detroit, or anything about the North?
Not a whole lot to expand on from last time. I think the Vikings don't have the offensive line consistently enough. I think the run game is going to be better. For one, it can't be much worse than last year, but, when you add Latavius Murray and Dalvin Cook, you're going to be better. But I don't think they have enough weapons on offense to consistently produce. And I think a bad offensive line is going to create too many negative outcomes, run stuff, sacks, pressures, things like that. That's going to be hard for them to consistently win when you have teams like the Packers and Lions that have legitimately good offenses.
Right, and that's where you get pressure on Bradford, as we saw at times last year. You get pressure on him, he's going to give you opportunities for turnovers, and I think that's where a lot of those issues will come too. I totally agree there.
Definitely.
So if you had to rank it, Ian, so you have the Packers 1, Vikings 2, Lions 3, Bears 4?
Yep.
All right, there we go. So that is our final look at all the divisions for this year. And just to kind of piggyback off the AFC East here, David Harris signing a 2-year deal with the Patriots, who, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, are continuing to feed off of players that are not retained in their own division. most notably as with Stephon Gilmore during free agency when the Bills let him go and weren't able to bring him back. And as we talked about before, Ian, I'm pretty much almost there, if not there already. I'll say 99% sure right now that I'm going to probably pick New England to win the Super Bowl again this year. Is because you look at everything that they brought to the table last year, including not having Brady for the first 4 games, and now you look at all the pieces that they've added this year, and I think besides Stephon Gilmore, the other one is making the trade for Brandon Cooks, and I think what he will bring to that offense now as a guy that is a true deep threat that I don't think the Patriots really haven't had since Randy Moss, and I just really don't know both sides of the ball, especially really all 3 phases of the game, I should say.
Where's the
how
weak
you
point?
Stop them?
There isn't one. There is not
Exactly.
a weak point on this team. This could be, kind of the big tamale for the New England Patriots. This could be the best team they've ever had, and this is in their history, they had a team go undefeated and lose 1 game, and that was the Super Bowl. I think there is a legitimate chance this team can go undefeated and win the Super Bowl this year.
So you definitely think this on paper coming into the year is better than the 07 team?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've said that. I think that this is a team that could go undefeated.
You know what? I tend to agree because I just think
hope I'm wrong.
What does that mean, though, that they could go? I mean, if there's anything that's going to do it, of course it'd be New England, but realistically, what are you saying the odds are? If you had to put
if I had to put a percentage, I think there's you're gonna think I'm nuts. I think there's a 75% chance this team can go.
Oh my God, you're crazy! Get the straitjacket out, man.
We've already done it once.
That's 75% chance of an incredibly difficult thing to do, just statistically alone for any team to do it. No way. There's a chance, but 3 out of 4 times this team. Ian. That Illinois elevation, it's getting to you.
Yeah, the elevation of Illinois.
I don't know.
Maybe
I think it's the flatness is what you're referring to.
It's probably sleep deprivation. Ian, you're a madman right now.
But maybe 75 is a little strong. But I think the chances are high that this team could go undefeated. I can't find any team in the NFL that could, over 4 quarters, beat the Patriots on paper.
It's not about that, because yes, the Patriots are going to be favored to win every single game, as they should be, but you just know if you play 16 games in the NFL with the regulars of the league, eventually you're going to slip up where you get a couple unlucky bounces, a bad turnover, some team just plays out of their mind, gets breaks. We know how this works. It's so tough to do.
Yeah, I get that, but in a division with the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills, there's 4 wins right there.
Catrillo, what do you think the odds are at 16-0?
As you and I talked about last week, Alex, I give it about a 45% chance of happening.
You guys are crazy.
But let's bring up the schedule here. Well,
yes, the Patriots on paper are going to be the favorite against every team. There's not a question about that. That's basically how it works every single year.
What I want to do is I just want to quickly skim through this here and just see where maybe they could get tripped up. Week 1, they have the opening game against Kansas City. I don't think they lose that one. They're at New Orleans. I think they'll have more firepower. They could find themselves maybe in a shootout, but I think that Saints defense is terrible, so I think they win that. They're home against the Texans. I think that's a win. Home against Carolina, I think that could be a tougher game than what some people might say, but I still think they can pull that off. But I think there could be one there. At Tampa Bay, I think might be a tougher game than what people may say, because I really like Tampa Bay this year. I think that could be a game where they might get tripped up. Then they have the Jets on the road. Obviously, I think that's almost a walk in the park for them at this point. Then they have the Falcons at home. Falcons looking for revenge, but obviously the Patriots are good at home. That could be a game that could get tripped up. At the Chargers at home, I think that's a win. At Denver, they never play well at Denver, so I think that is probably, if I'm looking at the schedule right now, let me hold that thought, because then the next week they are at Oakland. So 2 West Coast games for them against in a place where they always struggle in Denver, and then 2 against obviously what's probably going to be the second best team in the AFC in Oakland, and Oakland plays well at home. That maybe could be a stretch where that's going to be their toughest stretch of the year.
I should go to Vegas right now and put $100 on the Patriots winning at 75%, And if it happens, then I'm like a multimillionaire, right?
Probably, yeah. But tread carefully.
Ian.
But but there it is right there. I think that is their toughest stretch of the season right there. Is that as at Denver and at Oakland. So I've given.
I'm just at a point now where I can't go. There's no game where I don't think the Patriots can win, and that's where this confidence comes from. I think they can go undefeated. I've seen them go down big games and come back, and I've seen them blow teams out.
Yeah. Again, my point is not go pick up the schedule and pick the 2 games that they're going to lose. I couldn't do that, but I only give them like a 10% chance to go undefeated just because of how hard it is to go undefeated. To be spotless in every single game.
And
NFL is tough.
And Alex, as you and I kind of settled on this last week, maybe your mind might have changed since the last time we talked. I think you and I, and now that I've had a closer look at the schedule here, I think I would settle on 14-2. If I'm looking at the schedule right now for New England, and I think you were pretty much on that fence there. I thought you might have said 15-1.
No, you said 15-1.
I said 15-1. Okay, you said okay.
Yeah, 14-2 is I think realistic.
I think now that I've had a better look at the schedule, I'm going to say 14-2 now as well, because
only by 2 games, and I'm the crazy one.
2 games.
Only because
a lot of teams got 14-2. Only 2 have gone 16.
Only because I think that that game at Tampa is a tough one, and I mentioned that 2-game stretch at the Broncos and at the Raiders. I think they split that, and I think they lose the. I think they may lose that Oakland game, but
it's all a fruitless argument anyway. They're going to win the AFC East. They're very likely to be the number 1 seed and have home field advantage. So that's the bottom line.
But when you look at this division now, overall, kind of getting back on track here, is you see the Patriots are just walloping everybody in the offseason now, as we've seen, and we saw obviously the Super Bowl champs, and you look at the very sad state of the Jets right now. The Bills are always a so-so team. They haven't really done anything. I think they even might take a step backwards this year. But the Dolphins have been hovering around that playoff mark, and I think you saw a lot of good things from Adam Gase last year in the way how he was able to kind of bring the Dolphins back from a 1-5 start to a playoff team. And so maybe that's some threat to New England, but still, I think it's just fascinating how bad overall the rest of the division is, and just where New England is just totally up here, and they're just stealing players away from mistakes that all these other teams are making.
I love it. I know people hate the Patriots. I love it. I love watching David Harris get cut by the Jets, and the Patriots are like, oh yeah, you're so good. Come on down. Come help us win another championship.
Yeah, it truly is amazing about that. Alex, I know we talked with the AFC East last week. Still feel where Miami could do something here in the rest of the division. What do you? Is this? Let me change this question. Is this good for the league? The way the AFC East is.
Really did change the question up.
So.
I don't know. Yeah, probably everyone loves a villain, and everyone loves the chance to try to knock off that kind of team. I don't think that if the Jets were a little better, it was going to make the league any better themselves. So I don't really think about it if it's good for the league, because I don't really care if it's good for the league. I just focus on the Steelers and how to beat the Patriots. But I don't know. I don't think it's that bad.
More of a curiosity question. Ian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Was it bad for the league? No.
Okay.
No, I mean, that's a simple answer, I know, but it's that people are still going to watch whether or not the Patriots are still good or great.
I guess it was more just a curiosity question. Plus, you bring in everybody rooting against them. So, yeah, I see your points there. So, speaking of Oakland, we were talking about them earlier. The Raiders and Derek Carr have now completed a mega contract, a monster contract of 5 years, $125 million, $40 million guaranteed. So now this makes Derek Carr not only the highest paid quarterback in the league, but now the highest paid player in the league. So we obviously saw this coming, and I guess I'll take your first reaction, guys. Knowing the season Derek Carr had last year before the injury and how much that hurt Oakland, I'm guessing I'll just ask this flat out. Based on what you've seen so far from him, is he worth this amount of money? Let's start with Alex.
Is he worth it? Probably not, but the way these contracts work is you always have to one-up the next guy. You know, if you're going to deem a guy a franchise quarterback, and Derek Carr is, that's the money you're going to have to pay him. So it's not a question of really, is he literally worth $25 million per year? It's what do you have to pay the guy to stick around, and it's always topping the previous contract. So he was going to get that really no matter what. Raiders didn't have a choice, and just in the way Detroit's not going to have a choice when they want to do a long-term deal done with Matthew Stafford, is probably going to get a little more than Derek Carr.
Ian?
He's a great player. It's a going rate for a franchise quarterback. And the way that the cap keeps going up and up, it's not strapping these teams the way it used to. And we have to remember that, you know, what's the contract's total worth? Like what,
125 mil.
125 million. Okay. Those are what the max contract is worth. It's not always like that, and some of these guys don't always get to the last year of this contract. So things change, and it's $25 million guaranteed. I think Derek Carr is worth that. He's a franchise quarterback.
I pretty much agree with that. That it's just the way the trending is for the league, and this is the way it is. And if you want to keep him, this is what you have to pay him. And I also know that the salary cap isn't for now holding teams back from making deals like this, and I'll say the immediate future. But is there a point? Is there ever going to be a tipping point for this, where these types of big mega contracts, especially for quarterbacks, is going to eventually start becoming a problem for the NFL, let's say 5-10 years down the road from now? I think that's where I'll say worry/restraint on this comes from, is because, as you mentioned, it's only going to keep growing better, especially with players that, you mentioned Matthew Stafford, Ian, who might be a guy that might be next for this type of deal, and Kirk Cousins maybe for the Redskins. I'll talk about that in a second, where to me they haven't really proven enough to get that kind of a deal. And I'll even say Derek Carr hasn't necessarily gotten this kind of a deal. We're only seeing this is kind of more on the upside based on a great season he had last year before he got hurt. So I guess my question to you is, and I'll start with you this time, Ian, is there a tipping point where we have to say, hold on, we gotta find a way to kind of slow this down a little bit, or pull back a little bit from these mega contracts?
I don't think so. I mean, sure, you're going to get to a point where you're going to wonder if the money's worth it. But if we're talking just from a pure finance perspective of this league, and I know things were down a smidgen last year, the NFL's popularity is so high. They bring in so much money, and the amount of money that the players get paid is still, based on how much these franchises are bringing in, isn't it's a large percentage, but it's not the whole percentage. These teams could afford, believe it or not, even more, and they're making enough money to do so. So I don't think it's a problem for the NFL that these guys are making this kind of money. I actually think it's a really good thing that they're making this kind of money. When we talk about players that are worth getting paid, though, it's not a question, as Alex said, of whether or not we think that this player is worth it. Derek Carr has played really well the last 2 years, and he was due for a new contract. So if you're the Raiders, are you going to let him walk because you don't think he's worth $25 million, or are you going to suck it up and pay him $25 million because he gives you the best chance to win? And also, if you're the Raiders, you understand that the last 15 years you have been total crap. So what's worth it? Is Derek Carr worth $25 million, or is the idea of being a competitive, good team worth $25 million to you? And I think that's part of what we have to consider is Derek Carr is worth it not only from a player perspective, but also from a team perspective, where he has been one of the players that's helped lift that organization out of the shadows that they were in.
Alex, what are your thoughts?
I generally agree with Ian. I'm happy the players get paid what they do because, like Ian was hinting at, it's basically a fraction of what the NFL makes. NFL is a multi-billion-dollar business, and if a player makes $25 million, that's such a small fraction of what the NFL revenue is. It's all going to be, of course, tied into the way the salary cap goes. As the salary cap continues to go up, the players' salaries themselves will continue to go up, and we'll see what happens in this next CBA if that changes things too much. So really, what I think your question is, Matt, is the long-term health of the NFL and the salary cap, will that continue to increase? And it probably will, but the one thing I do wonder is just about these television contract bubbles that are $1 billion. I think ESPN pays for a year for NFL rights. Can that continue? Is that sustainable? And I don't believe that it is. There has to be a cap where TV cable companies will not be able to afford the rights to these games anymore, and that number is going to have to either plateau or start working its way back down, because we're seeing all the problems that some of these networks, ESPN, of course, on the forefront of things, are having. So will that have an effect on the overall league revenue and salary cap? It could. I'm not the guy to talk to about those big kind of issues, but I think as long as the salary cap continues to go up, the quarterbacks will keep making a proportional amount of money, and it'll increase. But that is the one thing I would say, is that there's a bubble right now with these TV contracts, and eventually that bubble's going to burst.
That's an excellent point, Alex, because that's pretty much where my argument lies. Is yes, you may be fine as the NFL corporation, multi-billion-dollar corporation, being able to play your players in that, but as the more money the NFL makes, the more all this comes up, as you just pointed out, Alex, very well. Then once this affects the TV contracts and stuff like that, then if there's a point where you have to you hit that peak point and now you have to take a step back or whatever, then how does that work with your players? And then that could open up a whole other can of worms. So that's where my worry lies as far as the NFL's future goes, as far as financially and the cap and things like that.
And I also wanted to add, if you think the NFL contracts are huge, take a look at basketball or baseball.
Especially baseball.
What a big contract is. And it's not about just numbers, it's about guaranteed money. Quarterbacks usually play out most of their deal and see most of their money. But even them, and for any other position, the contracts are worth the paper they're printed on. Baseball, they're guaranteed. Basketball, I think they're similar, and players have so much more flexibility. And the NFL, that big number that you see, rarely does any player get all of that money.
Well, Look, Mike Conley made how much money last year? He made more money than Andrew Luck. I know they're two totally different sports, but do you think that Mike Conley has the same impact on his team that Andrew Luck has on his?
No.
Definitely not. Yeah, both good points there. I just worry about that tipping point, Alex, that you alluded to, where this might hurt the NFL, even though they can afford to have the salary cap going up and up. I think it's a really fascinating conversation. It really is.
How the heck did I remember Mike Conley, but I forgot Bradford a few minutes ago?
He was in the end.
Just the way the mind works.
He never had it.
One other thing I want to piggyback off of this, guys, and then we'll move on, is with Kirk Cousins, with the Redskins, and where those contract negotiations lie right now. Because as you mentioned earlier, Alex, about Matthew Stafford, where he might be due for that big payday. This is obviously a bigger issue with the Redskins right now, as we've talked about ad nauseum all off season long. Of do they truly think and believe Kirk Cousins could be the guy going forward? They also can't really afford for their own salary cap constraints to keep paying him put him on the franchise tag. This year it's going to be $23 million. If they were to do it for a third year, which I don't anticipate them doing, whether or not they get a long-term deal done, then they have to pay him $34 million, I think it is, if they were to sign to another franchise deal or franchise tender. So, a franchise tag rather. So, either way, the Redskins, they know they're going to have to pay a lot. And if I'm with the Redskins, I would try to find that long-term deal and get that done by the July 17th deadline. But now this gives Kirk Cousins more leverage, and I don't know how much the Redskins are going to be willing to spend. Now, we've seen Dan Snyder spend money on big free agents in the past, but I just really still don't know where this lies. And now that I see this contract with Derek Carr, I think it really becomes more of a question mark on really how much confidence and how much do they really fully commit to Kirk Cousins now in the future. Let me start with Ian on this one.
Well, what are you really asking here? I mean, you put a lot of information out right there. What's your list?
I guess basically seeing this, do you think Kirk Cousins remains a Redskin? They get a long-term deal done now that they have more leverage with this contract that Derek Carr just made?
You know what? It's funny because we can talk about this today and something else could come out tomorrow and it'll totally change everything. The Redskins are one of the most unstable organizations in the NFL, so you just have no idea what's going to happen. I think, in my heart of hearts, I think he's going to play for the Redskins this year, and then Kirk Cousins will be playing for someone else next year. I think that's the way it's going to happen. I think he plays in the franchise tag this year, and they move on next year. Or maybe Kirk Cousins plays on the franchise tag the rest of his career. Who knows?
I agree. I tend to agree. I think if I had to lean right now, I lean towards this is going to be his last year in a Redskins uniform, and I think he ends up in San Francisco next year. Alex?
If I was Washington, I probably would have already traded him to San Francisco. But I think Washington is dumb enough where they're just going to they're going to sign Cousins to a long-term deal worth $27 million per year or something like that, because they're desperate. They make bad decisions. They got no one really running the show that you trust, and I just think it's going to be what Washington does. I think Cousins will have another pretty good, not great, but pretty good year. And instead of expending the energy to try to start over and find a new quarterback, they're just going to stick to what they have and give Cousins that mega deal.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised in considering the track record, but I just don't see them doing the franchise tag for a third year in a row for that kind of money. I think if they're going to do it, they would do the long-term deal.
Agreed.
And then finally, we're staying in the NFC East, but on a different topic here. Two Cowboys, we mentioned Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott getting some named high NFL honors. And we'll start with Dak Prescott first, who was named number 14 on the NFL's top 100. And Zeke Elliott was put on Gil Brandt's top 25 running backs of all-time list. I think that both of these are totally absurd, especially the Zeke Elliott one. Because when you talk about all-time, you're talking about guys that are retired, have already left that legacy. You're basing that on one great year that Zeke Elliott had, and I think he'll be a good back in this league. He's a very productive back, and if he keeps having seasons like he did in his rookie year, then I think he maybe could eventually be in that conversation. But to me, you can't base that off of 1 year. And same with Dak Prescott, and I think he is capable. I think of when you are putting someone in due for a sophomore slump, considering how he was last year. I don't think it's as bad as say Cam Newton's sophomore slump that he had, but I think you're going to see defenses find a way to get Prescott to turn the football over a lot more, or you might see him in a little bit of a slump, let's say, for a small stretch of time. But I still think Prescott will be a good quarterback in this league. So, Alex, we'll start with you and where you lie on these two issues and where you think they could go from here.
I barely even want to talk about it. I think they're just both dumb, and I don't think many people are going to agree with either ranking Prescott over Aaron Donald and Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger, AJ Green, the list goes on and on. No, that's not true. And Zeke at 26, I mean, Gil Brandt's been around forever, but he does have Cowboys ties, so that might have been a little present to Cowboys fans trying to get the discussion going.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. Ian?
Yeah, the Dak Prescott, the NFL Top 100 list is such a farce that I don't even want to give it the time of my voice.
I do agree.
Giving any sort of credit. The Gil Brandt thing, though, it was when I read his first headline was 20s or no, I'm sorry, Zeke Elliott was 26. It was like a top 30, and he's 26 will surprise you, but he totally belongs. Listen, if we were talking about Zeke Elliott as one of the best running backs in the NFL right now, I'll agree with you. You want to make an argument he's the best? I'll disagree, but okay, there's something there you can talk about. To put him on an all-time list over names like Franco Harris, come on.
Yeah, that's
not
atrocious.
Even in the same ballpark. That was the biggest. The rest of the list I was fine with, but to go over someone like Franco Harris,
yeah, that's just blatantly stupid.
Huge deal.
Yeah,
especially because Gil Brandt was with the Cowboys when he watched Franco Harris be one of the main reasons his team lost 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't get that. Maybe it's more of a hot take thing Ian and I you and I were talking about before the show. But I'll even add this in here and call me. This might be my Eagles fandom coming at me here a little bit. But this topic we're talking about here is the grand example of why we'll just say Eagle fans. I'll even say Pittsburgh fans, Giant fans, whatever, or just NFL fans in general, why they hate the Dallas Cowboys, because you get stupid takes like this, and this is exactly where we end up. This is the pure example of why I think it's justifiable for people to hate the Dallas Cowboys, because you get people like Gil Brandt and the NFL's top 100 where you just name glorify these two Cowboys. I think it's because of the star and everything else, and Jerry Jones and everything else that the Cowboys have been to this NFL, which a good amount of it is legitimate. They've won 5 Super Bowls. They had those good teams in the '90s. It's an iconic brand. I'm not going to deny that. I might be jealous of it because of where my Eagles fandom is, but I'm still not going to deny where they are, where they've been in the NFL's history. But it's stuff like this where it triggers that kind of hatred for this team. It really does.
Yeah, I guess, but I think people already hate the Cowboys for other reasons. Some just, some not, and this isn't going to really move the needle too much.
Right, I agree, but I'm just saying that this is the example of it. Because we're glorifying two guys that had great seasons, but it was only 1 year. You don't know, a lot can happen down the road. That's where I kind of put this all into fruition. And not only that, too, they didn't win a playoff game last year. They got upset at home as the number 1 seed by the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they even won a playoff game last year.
Listen, as good as Zeke Elliott was last year, he was great. If you want to put a running back in this list for 1 year, David Johnson probably had the best season of any running back last year. So talk about him.
Right. He even led the NFL in all-purpose yards or something?
All-purpose yards, yeah. You had Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson, and Zeke Elliott was right there. But if you ask people, there was nothing that said, listen, Zeke Elliott didn't run for 3,000 yards last year. Zeke Elliott came in, ran for 3,000 yards and 45 touchdowns. You want to throw him on a list? Fine, throw him on a list. He had a great rookie year. He's not one of the best of all time. After 1 year, that's ridiculous.
Exactly. I think we will leave it at that. And let's go now to our final topic today. And one thing that we were starting on the show, and you've kind of seen us do this on Twitter several times already, for those of you that have been following us, again, it's at FF Podcast 1, is we're starting to do starting to try and start up a little bit of a mailbag segment, kind of stealing what you do, Alex, at Steelers Depot each and every week, which I think you're doing next, if I remember correctly. And just sending us any NFL questions you might have, and then we'll answer it at some portion of the show, probably towards the end of the show like we're doing right now this week. It can be on the Eagles, the Steelers, the Redskins, anything NFL related. You ask us and we'll answer it. So we finally did get a question this week, and this goes out to Amerigo Allegretto at Allegretto92, and he asks... Amerigo, yes, our good friend from Clarion, I should mention that. He asked us, which rookies are you looking to stand out the most this year, and which ones do you think will not live up to the hype? So I will start with Mr. Hunter on this one.
We talking for the Steelers, or the Eagles, or are we talking
NFL overall?
Okay, so which rookies do I think are going to surprise us, and which ones I think are going to
disappoint
us? Okay, I think we've talked about this a little bit. I think this is a hard question because we haven't seen anything yet. If there was one guy I thought was maybe not going to play as well as maybe fans think, I think Jabril Peppers is going to have a harder time than a lot of people thought. And that's one guy that I think could be a disappointment this year. And I think one guy who's going to exceed expectations is going to be T.J. Watt. For where he was drafted, I think he has a legitimate chance of having a really big impact for the Steelers year one, and could surprise a lot of people with his production.
Alex?
I'm going to focus my answer to just rookie for this year, not long term. And I think one name that I think will have a really strong, two names that have really strong rookie seasons: Hassan Reddick, who I've been a fan of since the Senior Bowl, basically out in Arizona. I think the guys can play inside. We'll go ahead and move outside in some rush situations and put up some big numbers. Also, Josh Jones from Green Bay, the 61st pick in this year's draft. He's going to be a hybrid guy, a thumper. I think he's going to be able to help on special teams and create some big plays in the box. One name that I think is going to struggle this year, maybe not long term, but this year, David Njoku in Cleveland, just because it's so tough for tight ends to make the transition year one. I think his blocking, although there's effort, is going to need a lot of work. And of course, playing on a Cleveland team that's still finding its footing, may have a rookie quarterback in Kaiser playing for parts of the year is going to be tough. So I think Njoku's got a good long-term future ahead of him, but I think for any tight end his rookie year, it is going to be a struggle, and Njoku is a bit on the raw side.
All right, and for mine, I'm going to go with Ryan Anderson for the Redskins. I know a lot of people are down, Ian. I know you weren't a big fan of him on tape. I think he can make an impact just because I think there's going to be an opportunity for him there. He's kind of on the second team right now. He'll be battling probably Preston Smith for that job, but I think it's a job that he can win because you haven't seen that consistency with Preston Smith. Junior Collette's coming back from an Achilles injury, so I think Ryan Anderson is a guy that can jump in there come training camp and start making some noise. And then I like Reddick too, Alex. I agree with that. But the one other kid I'm looking out for is Chris Godwin from Penn State. I think he's in a great position down in Tampa Bay with all the other guys that he has around him. Jameis Winston, obviously, I like there at quarterback. I think he's got a very good chance to be productive. He's a guy that can make big catches in big moments, great, reliable hands. He's got that good downhill speed that just adds to all those downhill threats that the Tampa Bay has added this offseason, most notably with Deshaun Jackson if he stays healthy. But if Jackson can't stay healthy, I think Chris Godwin's a guy that can jump right in there and be that same go-to threat down the field. And I think Christian McCaffrey, I think he's going to have an outstanding rookie season, playing with Cam Newton, plus having Curtis Samuel. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do and get creative. And I think Carolina's coaching staff's going to do that with him, both using his versatility in the passing and the run game. So those would be my guys. One guy that I would be concerned about is Mike Williams. I loved him in the draft. I think overall he could have a good long-term future in the NFL. I think he will, I should say. But you got to be worried about that injury he suffered in camp. We'll see what his timeline is as far as being ready for training camp and the preseason and things like that. Something to look out for the Chargers, as the Chargers desperately need some more weapons in the passing game for Phillip Rivers now in LA. So those are my couple guys to look at. Any thoughts there?
Mike was off. Yeah, no, I think it's a good list, and like Ian said, it is so far out, it is hard to project, but that's my best guess is based off of fit.
There we go. So that's our mailbag for this week. So again, tweet us either at mcatrillo, at Alex_Kozora, at B104_Hunter, or at the podcast page at FFPodcast1 for any questions that you'll have us. We'll always tweet out usually about 45 minutes to a half hour before we start recording the show, and we'll try to get them all on the air and answer them to the best of our abilities, as we just did. So that's out there. Going to be out here for the rest of the offseason, and especially too as we get into the beginning of the regular season coming up soon. So that is going to do it for this edition of the show. Alex, Ian, good talking with you. We'll do this again.
We'll be here.
And I think we should be able to get an episode in next week before we will be taking a hiatus, because I will be obviously I have my wedding and honeymoon coming up. So if we decide not to do a show next week, we'll make that official announcement. We'll try to squeeze one more episode in before we take our little 2-week hiatus while I am away enjoying my wedding and honeymoon. So keep us up to date on that. Again, follow the podcast at FFPodcast1 on Twitter. We are also on YouTube. Check out all of our show archives at Football Friday. Very important there. And that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. For Alex and for Ian, I'm Matt Catrillo. We'll talk to you soon here on the Football Friday podcast.